becoming a visionary creative, and I'm going to repeat this quite a bit. Visionary creatives swim in the culture of their day. So right away I'm saying creativity is culturally grounded. And now we have to have an understanding of culture. And manifest in their work the spirit of the age, which is another term I'm having for culture. The things they create. And now I'm saying it's not just in art. Art, design, science, technology, business. Embody that spirit. And at the same time are a little off center for us. Somehow not what we expected, presenting a discontinuity that pulls us into the future. So I described the camel, the lion, and the child. The camel masters its culture and its discipline. The lion destroys that culture, attacks the dragon, whose name is thou shalt, who is, in other words, in school you appreciate all the stuff you've been given, but then maybe eventually that doesn't quite sound right, or that's not exactly what I want to do. So the lion attacks the dragon, and then as a child, you create the new. A wheel rolling out of its own center, by which Nietzsche means self-motivated. So, just a few thoughts here where I refer in my book to Einstein, Dali, Nietzsche, Rowling, Jobs, on and on and on. And then say, is this pertinent to me? These are the most creative figures of the past 200 years. Is that what I'm going to be doing? Does it make any sense for me to compare myself to Picasso? Well, I think we can learn from that. And depending upon your ego, I had some friends who met in their school, and they were later hanging out in New York, and my philosopher friend was visiting Danny, the painter, and Andy, the philosopher, sitting on the bed, and Danny had a big Picasso book, and so Andy's flipping through the book, and Danny's in the bathroom shaving, and he says, so what do you think of that Picasso guy? And Andy says, well, he's pretty good. And Danny says, I'm better. And Andy, very philosophical, and he says, you know, if you're going to be a successful artist, you have to think that way. You know, us objective, rational people might want to question that, but, you know, maybe that's how Danny should be thinking. So there are many lessons we can learn from them. And let's look at Gregor Mendel. So does anybody tell me, what did Mendel do?
The gene is like the flower.
Right. So before Mendel, the notion was, you know, people knew about heredity. If you're a farmer, you're going to breed your sickly cow or your big, fat, healthy cow. You know what's going on. But people believed in what was called blending. To exaggerate, if you had a black cow and a white cow and you bred them, you'd get a gray cow. If you had a medium cow and a big cow, you get a cow that's bigger than the medium but smaller than the big cow. So Mendel said, let's try that out. Now, I'm going to oversimplify here, but here's what he did. He had peas that had white flowers and peas that had red flowers. And he crossbred them. Everybody knew you'd get pink flowers. He didn't. He got 3/4 red flowers and 1/4 white flowers. And what that told him, that there were discrete units of heredity. He had no idea about genes or DNA, just discrete entities or units of heredity. And there was a rule that if you got 2 red genes, well, red units, you'd get a red flower. If you got a red and a white unit, you'd get a red flower. If you got 2 white units, you'd get a white flower. The red was dominant. So to vastly oversimplify, brown eyes are dominant over blue eyes. So if one of your parents has, depends upon what their recessive genes are, but if you get 2 brown-eyed genes, you get brown eyes. If you get a blue-eyed gene and a brown-eyed gene, you'll get brown eyes. If you get 2 blue-eyed genes, you'll get blue eyes. So that's the principle, and Darwin didn't know about that. Darwin thought blending was what worked, and so Darwin could never make his theory work because he had Mendel's book and he never read it. So it's a whole story. But who was Mendel? Mendel was a monk who twice flunked his exams to become a teacher. Nevertheless, he was curious and observant. That's all it took. He said, what's going on here? And he's as important as Darwin in the theory of heredity and evolution. Not by being bright, flunked his exams, and eventually they made him an administrator, but he did these experiments with peas. So maybe just being observant and curious is as important as being a genius. So Mendel had said, what if I breed, forget the peas, red flowers and white flowers? Let's see what happens. Here's some other what-if scenarios. Einstein was brilliant, but Heinrich Lorentz and Henri Poincaré were racing with him to do relativity. I knew they were all working on it. And Henri Poincaré is one of the great mathematicians of all time. Lorentz was well in advance of Einstein. He'd already done the Lorentz transformations, which was fundamental to Einstein's theory. But Einstein said, okay, an object is moving through space. What does that mean? What's it moving relative to? Absolute space. Einstein said, what if I assume there's no absolute space? Nobody else had made that assumption. That's all that, they were better mathematicians than he was. They were further along in putting the theory together, but they were all assuming that there's some absolutes, there's a grid that they're moving through. Just by saying, what if there isn't? The whole thing opened up, all of modern physics, from what if I assume that's it? Now, Einstein was smart. He was good. He did not flunk math, as people like to say. He needed help on the really difficult advanced math. But that was it. Igor Stravinsky. Everybody know The Rite of Spring? Who does not know The Rite of Spring? So he had done, there was this really intense artistic scene going on in Paris. And Diaghilev was a Russian producer and in charge of the Russian ballet. And he got Picasso to do the sets, young Picasso, and he got Stravinsky to compose, and they did Firebird, which was a success. And then they're doing their next thing. Firebird was enthusiastically received. Stravinsky then asked, what if I use the eroticism of primitive drums driving a human sacrifice in a musical composition? The audience rioted, and his reputation was made. Elvis. What if I take country music classics like Blue Moon of Kentucky, speed them up, intensify the beat, and back them with aggressive guitar? You got rock and roll. That's why he's the king. So the best Presley is the Sun recordings, the stuff he did at Sun Records the first year before his contract was sold to RCA. So I give these as music examples. Johnny Cash. What if I take Ring of Fire, which my future sister-in-law has recorded, and add mariachi-style Mexican horns? He got the biggest hit of his career. The Beatles. What if we use a symphony orchestra in a rock album? They got Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, now referred to as the most important rock and roll album ever made. Bob Dylan. So Dylan had launched his career as a folk artist with acoustic guitar. And then at Newport Folk Festival, he picks up an electric guitar and gets booed because sell out, this is no longer the genuine, folk acoustic guitar. But he goes on to become a major cultural figure of the 20th century and gets the Nobel Prize in Literature, which happened after I wrote this. So one of the lessons of this book is to question the obvious, test your ideas, and pay attention to the results. Ask yourself, what in your field is obvious to everyone else, but seems somehow not right to you? And then ask, what if? Doing so just might open productive lines of exploration. Okay, any questions about what if? So, tell you what, once I put this online, go look at it, grab each of these figures and go listen to the music. Go listen to just, one Sun recording by Elvis. It's the best stuff Elvis ever did. Listen to Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash. Listen to some Bob Dylan. Okay, see you next week.